Previously on Chaser.
Last thing I remember was the bastard who shot me. Kabir. I've got unfinished business with him. Where can I find him?
At the cosmodrome. But without inside help, you will certainly not get there.
Kabir will be at his cosmodrome. And I believe that you're the one to get me in.
So, we are here. This pipe leads directly to launch ramp. From here you can get everywhere. And if you find Kabir, send him regards from me.
I will.
Hello and welcome back to not only the final Russian level, the final Earth level, but also my favourite level of the game. As Piotr has suggested, we've been left off outside of a pipe, outside of the main cosmodrome spaceport, and as you can see from the mission goals, we have to make our way through what is conceivably the old part of the spaceport. This would appear to be the case as everything is kind of falling apart. We never actually really see the new part of it because everything just kind of looks the same. It's all grimy and rusted and, oh, basically falling to bits. From the small collection of debris, we can probably surmise that other people have been using this entrance before as well. This is actually one of a number of places that kind of get the same treatment, where it's quite obvious that someone else has been there and created the route before us, that it's been there for quite a long time. In fact, most of these little piles are dangerous to the degree that they're such a tangle of debris that it's possible for you to get stuck in there due to physics bugs and that kind of thing. Up and out of the main pipe, we find ourselves in a reasonably efficient little maze area. It's quite obviously a ventilation shaft of some sort. We've got an area below us and an area above. And what that means is that we basically have to find our way around here. You'll find that some places are gated off, that we can't proceed any further, but eventually we'll find a way through. This one particular area is of note, basically only because it's got a little hole up at the top, and you'll end up coming through there at some point if you take the wrong direction and end up coming through a very, very long detour. We'll end up seeing that later on. In fact, I'll skip through most of it, but this is just where you come out. Something that's fairly easy to miss, this gate isn't quite aligned vertically, so if you go up and nudge it, it'll fall over and you can get through. And this provides basically the way that we're supposed to go. I think it might actually be just that little bit too subtle. It's not something that's quite... I believe I may have missed it the first time I played the game. It's something fairly memorable. You know that you have to go through to the end and kick the gate down and then you can carry on. But still, that doesn't really help with the first time frustration. If it wasn't immediately obvious, this level is very big. We've already been crawling through vents for a good couple of minutes and we still have yet to see an enemy. And we won't be seeing an enemy for another couple of minutes, in fact. I've tried to speed things up where possible, mostly where it was things that were irrelevant, so it won't be quite so bad as it could have been. Directly ahead is the way out. I'm just going to go to the right for the sake of completion and show you what's over here. I'll speed that part up. This tunnel blockage here was the reason we couldn't just come directly to this particular ventilation shaft. Once again, directly ahead is the way we're supposed to go. It leads into a pipe which is very similar to the one which we started in, but I decided to do a little bit of exploring. and this is where a huge amount of time goes. Basically it leads us into a secondary ventilation shaft area, but the fan itself is broken, and it's possible to climb down underneath where the fan was. What this means is that we can actually access the area underneath the one we've currently been on, but there's absolutely nothing there. I'm under the impression that maybe there was an objective there at one point, but it's just simply for the fact that it's completely explorable and does in fact lead up to that one particular hole I'd mentioned earlier on. But really there's nothing down here, there's no enemies, no pickups or anything like that. So ultimately it's just wasted geometry and something you should really avoid putting in if you're a map designer. It's just way too much open space and it's very easy to get lost in. Here we are more or less back where we started again. Over here down in this area is the obstruction that blocked us that I neglected to show you the first time around. Partially out of adventure, but I think mostly out of frustration, I decided to try and see if I could beat the fan and try and climb down the ladder past the little hole. And in fact what I ended up doing was somehow glitching myself into the wall. At that point I ended up just falling through the map, and as we'd seen before in the underwater level, I just fell down and down and down, and eventually out of the bounds that you're allowed to exist, and eventually died. One good thing is that the last save file was on the other side of the obstruction, so we didn't have to backtrack through all of that crap again. So let's move ahead, shall we? We're in the pipe that's the continuation of the one that we started out in. Off to the left is the door that was closed that we couldn't get through, and off to the right is another door which apparently, although slightly askew, is actually closed and we can't get through. And the way that we actually proceed is by falling down into this little pipe here. The pipe itself isn't particularly obvious. In fact, you may have noticed that I completely forgot about it and just walked straight into it, which is a little aggravating, but yeah, they could have signposted it a little bit better, I guess. We took the wrong direction, so let's backtrack and speed that part up. Seems we have ourselves a fairly standard platforming puzzle. I'll see if you can figure it out. It's not terribly difficult. And this particular pipe is blocked off, so it's quite obvious that we need to stay in the main area. If it wasn't completely obvious, we just have to jump on top of the pipe we were currently inside, then it's, If you think this platforming bit is annoying, and kind of something you really wouldn't see in an FPS, well, you really haven't seen anything yet. We've got so much better to come in the rest of the level. Now, where was I? Oh yes. And if it wasn't completely obvious, we jump onto the pipe, and then we climb up this little rickety ladder, and then we can pretty much carry on from there. The other extreme of this pipe we can't get into. So just little things like that really annoy me. I want to get in there and I want to see what's there, but there's just absolutely no way to do it. I much prefer to have a place blocked off than be inaccessible in any way. It's just one of my own little things. And finally some combat, and as luck would have it, it's also my favourite part of the game. And no, it's not because of the combat after all of that non-fighting. It's actually the level design itself and just generally how this part of the level looks. There's one thing in game design that I appreciate more than anything else, and that is the way in which game developers put across things that are falling apart and under a great degree of disrepair. What generally the Western developers will do is just take a very everyday situation and then just break it up and through like a bomb blast hole in a wall and things like that. It's more things that have happened violently over a very short space of time. The thing I find about Western civilization is that whenever something gets to the point where it's just visually unpleasant and it looks like it's been falling apart for ages, the tendency for Western folk is to just clear it all out of the way and just start building afresh. But with things from Eastern Europe and Russia, I don't know if it's just a hardwired thing from growing up in the era when that whole area was under communist rule, and you just had the impression that everything was just kind of hand-me-down and kind of rubbish and no real new developments were happening or anything like that. It's the way that they approach dereliction is to just take something that has been there for a long time and just kind of crumble it at the edges and have bits lying around. Like things have fallen over, like it's just kind of a case of littering in a sense, where things have just been left to lie around and no one really cares anymore. I think it's that the thought that everything is overgrown and just kind of forgotten about that I appreciate, because that takes a hell of a lot of work to get right. More so than a place that's been destroyed by an explosion or anything like that. I think that's easier to do because you can just scatter things everywhere. But with things that have been falling apart over time, it takes a little bit of finesse, and I think Eastern European developers have that pretty much down. You'll find that in games like Stalker especially, and in a way Metro 2033 it's not quite up there, but definitely the Stalker games has that whole dereliction thing down. It has it absolutely nailed down, and that's why I love that game more than a lot of other ones. As far as this particular part of Chaser goes, it's really the stark concrete crumbling around and just lying in piles and things. We'll see a little bit more of that later on. It's actually fairly clean in places for this particular part, but this whole area just kind of sums up what Chaser is about. It's about a future that's in a sense very dystopian. It's not a pleasant place to live, that much is for certain. The main feeling I take away from things is that the general populace just doesn't care about anything. Everything is just left to fall to bits. Although having said that, we have been spending most of our time in areas away from large sections of population other than Montagne City, but even then we were in the slum areas and everything was still kind of falling apart. The area that we're currently in is kind of one half of a section that we can explore around this particular part of the level. And we've reached the end of that now, so we need to find a different place to go. And over here is one of those structures I was talking about at the start of the game, where it looks like someone has just kind of prized open a way to get through that ordinarily wouldn't be accessible. Once again, it's a place where you can quite easily get stuck if you don't kind of climb it in the right way, so you have to be very careful. You may not have noticed it there, but we were actually facing in the right direction. That graded fence has just kind of a little tear in it, and we can squeeze underneath it. It's not immediately noticeable, and as you can see, I end up wandering around this pretty much this fairly large section trying to find a way through before heading back. So I will just speed that bit up. And for the sake of completion, let's go and have a look at the other fence. There we can see that there's nothing going on, so let's just turn and go back. This new section is pretty much just a mirror copy of the one we were just in. We've got a couple of guys knocking about and not really much else. only thing different is that we don't have a grating to go through, so we're going to have to find another way out. It seems that down this ladder is the way to go. I didn't need that health anyway. Off in this little corner we've got a break in the wall, inside of which we've got some what seem to be crates of explosives, at least from the sign anyway. What's a little strange is that we don't need to blow them up in any way. The hole that we need to be going through, or we would expect the explosion to create, is already there. So it's not as if these boxes actually needed to be there. Maybe they're there just to give a reason for there being a hole in the ground, but really it seems very superfluous. Dropping down into the hole leaves us in a fairly precarious position. We're standing on basically what amounts to a pillar, with about 3 or 4 guys all shooting at us. I played through this particular portion before under much less health than I have now. In fact, I think it was in the single digits, and it was such a difficult time that I'll always remember this part. That's the reason why I'm taking my time and making sure I can kill as many as I can without exposing myself. After that terrible effort at a firefight, the problem remains of finding a way down. The way we have to go is behind us, but I'm just kind of looking around as if to show you just how much confusion you can be in if you don't look in that direction whenever you drop down here. It's very easy to think that you'd need to drop down and lose health. Just ahead of us we've got another very memorable part of the game. It takes a little while to play through, but it's I find it to be worth it. The premise is pretty straightforward. We basically have a gigantic room with a half repaired or complete spacecraft in the middle, and we've just got lots of guys at various different altitudes that we have to kill. It's really no more than that. I'm going to take my time and just make sure I kill as many as I can before I start dealing with the second part of what this room is for. As you might expect from Chaser, the enemies are quite adept at taking you out from a very long distance, so making use of cover is essential. The craft itself is suspended over quite a large drop, and that would infer that this, in a sense, is some kind of launch platform all in itself, but the opening at the top doesn't actually allow for the craft itself to get through at full wingspan, and it doesn't look like the roof opens up any further than that, so it's a little strange to imagine how they might actually get this thing out of there. They must have to separate it into its 3 components and then take them all out one at a time. The enemies in the upper levels tend to actually roam about quite a lot. I got lucky and killed quite a few of them before they had the chance to, but you can find that sometimes they'll wander around at least halfway in a circuit around the upper level, and you kind of have to bait them into shooting at you to kind of stop them moving around. I like this particular section because it's fairly atmospheric. I like the sounds of the birds and just the general background ambience, sort of humming noise that it just infers that it is a very busy place outside of where you are. You just happen to be in a section where you're kind of concealed away from it. Obviously we are supposed to be heading towards the new section of the base, so that infers that there's some activity going on somewhere, but we can only kind of just hear it off in the distance. And something about the acoustics of this particular room just happens to amplify it a little bit. Now of course it's just as likely that they needed just some background noise to put in a very wide open and boring area, so it's yeah, it's more likely to be that, but I like to have my dreams. You may have noticed there that a ladder that we needed to climb is well, sort of rungs have come away from the wall, so we have to find another way up, and that ends up just being right beside where the rungs are. We have to climb up some debris, but first we have to take out this guy. Having come this far, I've decided to take the long way around, so I'm going to speed up most of that. I'll pause it now and then so you can get a nice look at the ship. And here we've got a brief glimpse of the debris we'll be climbing up. And now we're back where we first climbed up, where the broken rungs are like just lying on the floor. The climb isn't quite as perilous as it looks. These little shafts of metal are actually little rectangles of platform, a lot wider than they appear to be anyway, at least in terms of visible geometry. So getting up to at least the high point of the debris is fairly easy. The difficult part is just the section here where you've got a sloped thing with a very small sort of precarious little tip to it. If you time that wrong in one way, you'll just fall down and lose a little bit of health. If you fall the other way, you'll slide all the way off it and down onto the bottom floor and die, obviously. You'll see I'm taking my time getting up the ladder. The reason is fairly obvious, in that as soon as you poke your head up, you've got another couple of guys just taking shots at you. Quite a bit of a dick move, but well, I've come to expect it by this point. The worst thing about that particular encounter is that there is nowhere to hide. You can either stay on the ladder if you know in advance that it's going to happen, which is what I did, or you can jump up there and just try and kill them all as quickly as possible, and really it's not going to happen. Not easily anyway. Oh, the door is closed. Huh. Okay, well what the hell did I climb up here for? Okay, well I guess it's back to the opening and we'll see where else there is to go. I'm gonna have to go this way, aren't I? It's not a pleasant jump to make. It is one where you have to be going as fast as possible, and the crouch jump helps a lot. In fact, I find this game a little bit unfair in that it relies on the crouch jump quite a lot, and it's not something that comes intrinsically. I mean, even when it made its debut, at least for me, in the first Half-Life, it was something that was tricky to master, even though it comes very simple now. But to expect someone to just know it offhand, I guess is an okay assumption these days. But back when I was first playing this, it seemed a little silly because no other games were really doing the crouch jump except for Half-Life. A final glance behind us and we are done with this particular room. We're now moving on to fresher and brighter climbs. We were dumped out into a fairly unenviable position. With those first three guys went down fairly easily, but we've still got a couple of guys knocking around, particularly behind this what appears to be a discarded wing of another spacecraft. I don't exactly know what it's doing out here. If I was to hazard a guess, I would say it was being winched out the top of the other building we just left, and probably just fell down the side of this one and just got stuck where it was and left there. Now on the other circuit of this particular part of the map, as I mentioned before, and I'd looked down these vents before, and they actually lead down to that section where we were at the very start of the game, well not on this side but on the opposite side. Nice little bit of shattered concrete here, whether that's weather damage or some other sort of impact I don't know, but it looks very nice. The thought occurs to me that, well, whereas in some games, in order to kind of set dress the place, they would just kind of throw in objects like barrels and things like that to kind of give it a bit of pizzazz. In this particular game, they just take the level geometry and just smash it to bits and throw in the set dressing that way. I like that more, as it turns out. I'm currently poking around the section of the circuit that was blocked off when we were on the previous side. Doesn't appear to be any way to squeeze through, so we'll just make our way back. It's a little hard to make out. In fact, we got a better look at it earlier on in the level, but directly above the section where the separated apart spacecraft was is a lot of scaffolding, and it does go up quite high. Whether or not that's some sort of control tower or a launch tower of sorts, but we get a look at something similar at the end of the level, so it's not entirely without merit to say that it probably is a launch tower, but with the heavy fog it is fairly difficult to tell for certain. You may have noticed some of the surrounding buildings. They really play no purpose whatsoever. They're just kind of there to fill the horizon. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the actual area that we're running about in is kind of dipped down so that we can't see quite that far off into the distance. Just this, well, it saves the level designer a lot of hassle and having to populate the near distance. Running very low on health at this point, so I need to take things particularly carefully. We're pretty much at the final outdoor section of the level. From this point on, it's all pretty much indoors. I'm sure the earthquake goes some way to explain the disrepair that the cosmodrome appears to be in. However, the effect itself seems a little bit strange to just be tacked on. It's really out of place compared to everything else in this level. Through the entranceway ahead of us is where we've got our next sort of pitched battle, and it ends up being just kind of a looting area. There's tracks for trolleys and things like that for things to be carted around. There seems to be one end of one particular transportation node. We're at the point where things are starting to get a little bit noisier. You can hear in the distance just the sound of general activity of things being slammed around. It certainly seems that we're in a place that's much more alive. You can see one end of a set of tram tracks just over the railing there. Someone appears to have dropped a box on the tracks for some reason. Chaser seems to suffer the same thing that a lot of games have, in that things are generally quite busy. We've got a lot of boxes here, and I do take the time to climb up them and have a look around and that sort of thing. It's generally because I'm the type of the type of gameplay style I tend to adopt is sort of an exploratory kind. So I'll search for every nook and cranny for anything interesting. And but these days things seem to be almost needlessly busy. There's a lot of stuff just sort of lying around, but there's nothing really to show for it. And I found that most recently in the Alien vs Predator 3 game, and it was kind of crowded and busy, and there were nooks and crannies, but there really wasn't anything to see. I think the nicest sort of version of a busy place with things to look at is probably Fallout 3. I really enjoyed just sort of looking around in the nooks and crannies, because there were little stories to tell, particularly on some of the expansions. You've got really silly things like little teddy bears being tied to railway tracks and things, just very, very strange things that the designers have obviously put in just for shits and giggles, and it's things like that I like. But when you've got so much going on and you've got no reward, it's kind of defeats the purpose of being the sort of person to explore, and I don't enjoy that kind of deflated feeling of wasted time. The uniforms of the guys we're fighting are more what you'd expect from the sort of the active section of the spaceport. We've got guys in just workers' uniforms and things, just kind of moseying around. Obviously they're all paid guys by Kabir, so they're all armed, which kind of makes sense of an engineer carrying a gun around. Obviously we've still got the commando guys around just to give us a bit of a fight and to keep us replenished with the scoped AK-47. Without that, we'd really been in a lot of trouble. It is kind of saving our back in that, and the thermal scope on the sniper rifle. That upper section that we just left with the tunnels is something we actually come back to later on, so we'll be seeing that fairly shortly. It's just part of a puzzle that we have to, well, not so much of a puzzle, but just kind of a set piece that we have to take part in. To see down here, so let's keep moving on. As we move further into this particular section, we find that there's just even more bits of crap just lying around. We've got boxes and things just lying half on their sides, and little bits of warning barriers and things lying around. It gives me the impression that the guys here were trying to at least clear the place up or do some maintenance work. Fortunately, we appear to have interrupted that, and they haven't really got all that much done. You may have noticed me looking at a bit of grating up there. That's on the other side of the upper tunnel area that we were in before. The reason for that will become apparent fairly soon. Our way forward is blocked off. I think it's fairly obvious what we need to do. It's not exactly rocket science. Ah, well, we've got our destination in mind, so we'll just quickly nip up there. Well, it looks like we're taking a barrel with us. I wonder what we could use that for. That little sequence there is a lot more difficult than it actually looked. I knew in advance obviously what was coming, so I took the opportunity to just stay as low as possible and stick to the barrel. If you don't, then because all the enemies fire from their head, generally they'll see you and be able to shoot at you long before you can even react to kill them, so you're pretty much guaranteed to take some hits. So the main chunk of the level is actually finished now. We find ourselves a little tramp, so we can take that to what ultimately is the more active part of the base. We don't really have much base to fight through, but we do have an encounter coming up, so let's just carry on and enjoy the sights while we do that. And by sights I mean the same bit of looping geometry over and over and over. Ah, we're here. That was quick. Well, let's just have a quick look around just to make sure that nothing has come up behind us. We certainly wouldn't something like that to happen. Cutscene coming up. Keep an eye on someone's very itchy trigger finger.
I thought worms were already devouring you, Chaser.
You're a lousy shot, Kabir. But here's an opportunity to save your life. I need your ticket to the space shuttle.
Sorry, but I am regrettably unable to help you.
Well said, Kabir. You'll be sorry about this soon. Very soon.
Fuck, 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 fuck! Okay, that's a very nice welcome to the boss fight. Basically what we have to do is obviously kill Kabir, but things unfold a little differently than they have before. With other fights we just basically have one guy to kill and we just run in and do that. But now we've everything kind of happens in waves. We've got, first up, we've got a bunch of guys who are coming to get us. After we deal with enough of those, the second wave will open up, and we'll get to that eventually. This fight does take a long time, and it is very wearing on you. You have to save plenty and save sensibly as well, because it's quite easy to save yourself in a position where you can just get fucked in the ass pretty easy. And plus it also helps to know where all the supply points are, in which case there's only one, and it's directly in front of Kabir's line of sight, so obviously you've got that to contend with as well. But that's not the biggest problem. While the actual enemy guys themselves aren't really all that much of a problem, we're more than capable of taking care of them, even if they just continuously respawn. The Gatling guns themselves prove to be the biggest hassle. Kabir takes a lot of hits, and he has comparable weapons, and he has a grenade launcher as well, but he tends to spend most of his time behind a pillar, so you don't generally have to deal with him all that much. It's the Gatling guns that are the biggest problem, and it's not only the case that we've just got the two which are on the ceiling. Eventually the waves unfold to the point where we have a few more to deal with. First time you play, it's almost a certainty that you'll find yourself in a position where you'll be right in front of those Gatling guns as soon as they appear, and you will be screaming and shouting. But fortunately, I'm aware of where they're going to come from, so I can at least take some solace in the fact that I know where I can hide. And the new sentry guns have made their appearance. You can see that they appear in all four corners, and if you happen to be anywhere in the middle, you'll just get torn to pieces. So hiding in the corner, although kind of cowardly, you can see why I've been doing it this whole time. Basically, they're a lot easier to hide from than the ones in the ceiling, because there's a lot more cover at eye level. Basically, it's just a case of sniping what little of them you can see. They'll not be able to see you if you just can snipe away at the edge, which is fine. A couple of grenades help now and then, but mostly you really won't have that much of a problem. you just have to keep in mind that you're going to have to keep the guys at bay as well, so you can at least get the opportunity to destroy the sentries, because they are easily the most important thing to get rid of. Taking a lot of hits, so it's time to make a mad dash for the only health and armor there is around. And when you get there, you find that there's quite a hefty supply here, so you'll end up spending quite a bit of time just kind of nestled down in this particular sort of divot. However, through practice and playing this game so much, that I know that it's easier to just avoid here and actually stay where I was previously. But we're just low on health, so we're just going to have to make the dash for it. Just in case you forgot, Kabir is still there, and we'll take a few pot shots here. Every little bit does actually help. A little difficult to get anything done when we are down in this divot, because we're still being covered by Gatling guns, so we'll just take the opportunity in this brief lull in the enemy spawning to take one of them out. Strictly speaking, I think it is possible to simply kill Kabir at this point, but we're not going to do that just yet. There's one final little surprise that the game has if you decide to kind of back off the way you were going. We'll just take a walk over here and we'll see exactly what that was. Two Gatling guns and a bunch of guys. I don't know where the guys came from, but those Gatling guns, that's a real sneaky thing to do. I'm very disappointed in Kabir. You can see that the sentry guns are hugely affected by distance. In fact, they have a kind of a cut-off region where if you go too far beyond it, they can barely hit you at all, and sometimes they just won't even fire. And I'm making good use of that now. When we come across sentries later on in the game, and we will come across a hell of a lot of them, it'll be this sort of tactic you'll see me using of just staying as far away as I possibly can, because they are, with possible exception of one particular enemy that we'll find later on as well, the sentry guns are the most annoying thing in this game, because they just take so much punishment and they're so quick to kick your ass. Fortunately, they have a minor wind-up period. However, if you manage to get out of the way and they start to wind down, they instantly can start shooting if they're in the middle of that winding down period. So you do have to wait until they've completely spun down before you can really risk stepping out in front of them again. However, we've destroyed them all, and no more guys are spawning, so the only thing left is to take care of Kabir. Kabir himself is carrying a weapon we'll see more of later on in the game. It's basically a rapid-fire machine gun of sorts, and it comes with a grenade launcher attachment, so it is definitely a weapon to be respected. Fortunately for us, or kind of unfortunately, as for the sake of time, Kabir is hiding behind a pillar, and we kind of have to hunt him down, or at least hunt out a decent angle to shoot him from. Few lucky headshots in a row, and Kabir is down. Now we don't have to worry about him anymore, so we can, well, we can basically get our ass to Mars. Any time now. You know what? Fuck this. And with that, we're done with Earth, so I'll see you next time. Next time on Chaser.
My name is not Quinn! Get your ass to balls! Get your ass to balls! You idiot! You blew my cover! You kill us all! See you at the party, Richter!